Peach Girl is a shoujo manga series written by Miwa Ueda about a high schooler named Momo Adachi and her trials and tribulations as she circumnavigates a love triangle filled with rivalries, friendships, betrayals, and all the other things you might expect from a high school romance drama. Alongside Momo are a few other important characters such as her main rival Sai and the love interest Toji and Kairi, all of whom you will soon become very familiar with in the course of this review. Originally published in Bosatsu Shoujo Friend by Kodansha, where it ran from 1998 to 2003, Peach Girl was then released in a manga series of 18 volumes, of which to date have been sold over 13 million copies, had 2 sequels in Sai's story and the currently ongoing Peach Girl Next, being adapted into a TV series in Taiwan, a 25-episode anime series, and even a live-action movie, which is why we are here today. First, I feel like it's necessary to establish why I am in the position of reviewing this movie in the first place. Why am I making a review of a movie adaptation of a manga series aimed at what is almost certainly an entirely different demographic from the one on which I fit? Where did it all go wrong? Where did it all go right? Well, the story starts back in circa 2019 when I decided to do a stream of WikiHow, you know, the website that has tutorials for how to do basically anything, often alongside a series of wonderful and informative illustrations. It was on this fateful day that we discovered the article, How to Be a Kawaii Girl, in which, in section 3, step 2, was written the following piece of life-changing advice.
Try watching anime. It's super fun and interesting, and there's something for everyone. It's not all fighting and things like that. For example, try watching Peach Girl. It's great.
Now, I don't know what it is about the way this was written that amused me so. Maybe it was the random air grab suggestion of watching Peach Girl, a show I had seen a screenshot of once and had a very vague notion of. Maybe it was the heartfelt review at the end of the sentence, summarized simply by the phrase, "It's great!" replete with exclamation point for added impact. Maybe it's the fact that I went on to read about the plot of Peach Girl and discovered that this was something so outside my wheelhouse that I felt the need to watch it kind of ironically as a joke. But whatever the reason was, so did it transpire that I created a channel point redemption on my stream for a mere, if memory serves, 15,000 points you could make me watch and have to review an episode of Peach Girl, and this often ended up amounting to several episodes per week. I would watch the episode, take screenshots and throw them into an epic PureRef document, then talk through them on stream at the weekend, and all those VODs still exist on YouTube by the way, so I will link the playlist in the description for anyone interested. Anyhow, when the time eventually came to run our annual Extra Life charity drive, and by our I mean the Vikings of Twitch streaming collective, linked also in the description, we had to come up with some donation incentives, and I got to thinking, well, I just found out there's a live action Peach Girl movie, how about I do a review of that? And so the idea was born. We did our 24-hour charity stream, raised a bunch of money for children's hospitals. Thank you, viewers and contributors once again, for your amazing donations to a great cause. And thus it was ordained that I was to do this review at some point in the next year. Well, it didn't quite pan out that way. I did a lot of work on this, but I was also busy with real work and a bunch of other things that ended up making this take more time than I had anticipated, and ultimately I ended up finishing this many months later than the deadline. There are people whose channels I'll look to for inspiration on how to write something like this. People like Pushing Up Roses, who does fantastic reviews on adventure games and all TV shows like Murder She Wrote, Goosebumps and The X-Files, and Kenny Lauderdale, who does a lot of great old school and obscure anime reviews, both of whom I highly recommend and will link in the description. And what I learned from my experience in doing this is that I have nothing but the utmost respect for anyone who can put out content at a constant rate of a similar kind, because this one video was such a colossal time sink that I have actually aged a year during the process of creating it. Anyhow, that's the basic rundown of Peach Girl and what it's all about and why we are here today about to review this movie, but I've rambled long enough, so I think it's time we get into it. I'm going to start by doing a recap of the story of this movie, and it's going to take a while because this is like a 2-hour plus movie, and there's a ton of dialogue and lots of little events that set off other payoffs later and a whole bunch of details and stuff that just kind of have to be included. So I guess what I'm saying is buckle up, because we're in for one hell of a ride. Before we set off on that ride, on a serious note, I feel I should hit you with a content warning, because even though this is kind of a goofy high school romance drama, there are allusions to themes that include sexual assault and attempted suicide in this film that are generally brushed over rather than dwelled upon. Still, it's worth you knowing about it, so you have been warned. Anyway. Oh yeah, one more thing, small disclaimer, I have not read the original manga series, I've only seen the anime adaptation, so if I miss something that is referenced in the manga or assume that it's an addition to the movie that wasn't in the series, it's because my knowledge of Peach Girl is sadly incomplete. That being said, let us begin. Onwards, to the movie! The movie starts with a couple on the beach who we can assume to be our protagonist Momo and, spoiler alert, whoever she ends up with at the end of this movie. It's a teen romance drama love triangle super pop love hurricane for the ages, and we are about to head out on a journey that might change your life forever, you never know. Embarking upon this journey, we are now introduced to our characters in a fun title sequence, starting with Mizuki Yamamoto as number one bitch in the school, Momo Adachi, who displays front and center her character trait of mild heliophobia, or to put it another way, she's insecure about being more tanned than the other girls in school for reasons that will become clear later on. Next on this list is Kei Ino as most popular boy in the school, Kairi Yokoyatsu, seen here gazing longingly in the direction of Momo and surrounded by his enthusiastic fan club / entourage. A well-placed panning shot reveals Mei Nagano as Sai Kashiwagi exiting a fancy sports car driven by a fashion model by the name of Jigoro, played here by Daisuke Kikuta, a character she meets much later in the animated series, but whom he or she appears to be dating already at this point in the film, and, in true tribute to her character, is introduced as the little devil in the school. She's apparently also already a fashion model, and she is surrounded by adoring fans, begging for autographs. And now it's time to learn more about the daily tribulations of Momo. Suffice it to say that her sun-kissed complexion and comparatively light hair leads many of the other people in her school to believe that she's some kind of promiscuous playgirl, and the rumor mill sure isn't helping. High schoolers be mean, y'all. She shows up in class to a bunch of misogynistic pigheads slinging similar bullshit around, and as she's about to lay into them, betraying some of her admirable no-nonsense I don't give a fuck what you think assertive tendencies, our fourth character intervenes his way into the scene, and we are introduced to Makenyu Arata in the role of Kazuya Tojigamori, aka Toji, Momo's crush and the most refreshing boy in the school, which is, to be sure, one of the most unexpected descriptors of a human being I think I've ever read. So, back to Momo. It turns out she's insecure about the colour of her skin because she's been led to believe that Toji's only interested in fair-skinned girls, which leads to this particular gag in which Sai produces the first of many interesting noises in this film. We also learn something about Sai, and that she's the kind of girl who always seems to covet the things Momo likes, in this case buying a pouch that Momo was interested in, an event directly echoed in the show. So later, in the cafeteria, Momo is in the middle of a romantic delusion, as promised by the handy on-screen display, in case you all weren't capable of figuring that out from the anachronistic sequence of dreamy vignettes currently being presented, when Sai interrupts her noticeably goofy daydream expression and attempts to find out who her crush is. Upon discovering that it might be Toji, we also learn that Sai is actually a vassal of the Dark Lord, and, real talk, Nagano-san absolutely nailed that demonic eye roll. In an attempt to misdirect Sai, Momo instead tells her that Kairi is her crush, and we're treated to this delightfully shudder-inducing pre-pandemic sequence of Kairi's fan club engaging in questionable acts of poor hygiene. Maybe you're fine with this, I won't judge, but this just makes my damn skin crawl every time. Anyway, Kairi notices Momo looking his way and shares with her an impressive glitter wink, devastating enough to bring a pall of deathly silence upon the erstwhile cacophonic dining hall, which serves as a nice segue into our next scene. You see, it turns out that Kairi's fan club don't like all this attention Momo's taking away from them, especially this girl, who is so adamant about her estimation of Momo that she can't help but share her feelings a second time. And the primary impetus for this rebellion stems from a rumor that apparently Kairi had spread about them sharing a kiss. Upon learning this, Momo goes into overdrive and proceeds to demonstrate another of her traits, her ability to fucking flying knee a motherfucker in the goddamn face, right in front of the school nurse, a woman by the name of Misao Aki, for those of you in the know, played in this movie by Yuika Motokaria. So Kairi and Momo go to hash this out, and while Kairi insists on being a goofball, he recounts the tale of how Momo saved him from drowning in the sea with the kiss of life, a fact that turns out to be completely false, as Momo recounts her side of the story in form of this dramatic flashback set to the dulcet and romantic tones of Verdi's oratorio masterpiece, Messa da Requiem, and yes, that was a classical music joke, and yes, I'm very proud of myself. Anyway, Momo demands that Kairi does something to stop the spread of the rumors, so he commits an abhorrent act of sexual harassment and surprises Momo with a kiss. Needless to say, Momo does not take kindly to this transgression of her rights as a human being and sends Kairi packing, but not before the devilish Sai manages to get the whole thing on video. After school, Momo goes home to a flower shop run by her mother, Sakuraku Adachi, played here by Momoko Kikuchi, who, by the way, had some pretty slapping electropop albums back in the 80s. And we are treated to this wonderfully kooky scene in which we discover her mother's penchant for yelling at flowers and dishing out sagely romantic advice. Or maybe not so much. I think they just put this scene in to establish Momo's knowledge of flowers that will pop up a bit later on. But it was goofy and I enjoyed it, so sure, go for your life, filmmakers. Also, to reiterate an earlier point, I haven't read the manga series, so this is something that could have been in the manga that I've just missed because I didn't read it. The very next day, Momo is back in school and greeted by a hysterical Sai who shows Momo that the video of her and Kairi kissing has been uploaded to a real fake Instagram and what looks like a burner account. Not suspicious at all, Sai, way to go! And for the record, I did try looking up this account number to see if anything existed online, as sometimes these things actually do, such as in Sony Pictures' Mitchell's vs. the Machines, in which Katie's YouTube account actually does exist online. That movie's great, by the way, y'all should watch it. By the way, hi, it's me from the future. Apparently the original Katie Does Film Stuff channel doesn't exist anymore, but I did find the original URL and there's extremely low quality footage that proves that it did so at one point. You can still find many of the videos from the channel that were re-uploaded under new accounts using the same name, but none of the originals are there anymore. Also, I just realised that Sai is just the kind of person to use burner accounts online, so actually this makes a lot of sense in the meta anyway. Feature me out. Back to the video. Momo is suitably upset and goes to confront Kairi, believing him to be the culprit, where he denies responsibility but recommends that they date anyway, a recommendation that is suitably met with cold reception given the circumstances. Back in class, Momo discovers that Toji has been shown the video and leaves the room utterly mortified, so Toji heads out to confront Kairi about the nature of their relationship. Kairi starts acting like a horny goofball again, eliciting the same response from Toji as he got from Momo, and Toji leaves in anger, warning Kairi never to mess with Momo again. Kairi, having learned Toji's true feelings, resolves to get serious. A segue now plays out in the form of a short montage as we see Momo walking home from school, Toji playing baseball and Kairi making cakes as a pâtissier. If you're wondering why I slowed down a bit there, it's because this is the first major difference between the film and the anime, and things start to go their own way a bit from here. It will make sense in the context of the film, especially considering they had to cram 25 episodes into the space of a 2-hour movie. So for now, let's just roll with it. I'll be talking more about the differences after the recap, so we can get into it there. Kairi comes home to find his big brother Ryo, played by Kensei Mikami, having dinner with the school nurse Aki Misao. Remember from the scene earlier where Momo flying knees Kairi in the face? Also present is Ryo and Kairi's father Takashi, played here by Takeshi Masu. They've been talking about preparations for their wedding ceremony, but they leave just as Kairi gets home. And then Dad wastes absolutely no time in coming out with this shit, and begins to lay into Kairi for not measuring up to his lofty expectations. Now, I don't know about you, but literally calling him inferior to his big brother and saying things like study until you feel like dying wouldn't really get me in the mood to take that advice, but since Kairi's actually pretty diligent, that's exactly what he does, except he's not studying for school, he's studying to be a great pastry chef, which is something his father seems to be completely unaware of, a fact confirmed by Ryo as he also conveniently informs the viewer that Kairi is already working at a 3 Michelin star restaurant, before dropping some brotherly advice and leaving Kairi to stare longingly at a picture of Momo, who is staring longingly at a picture of Toji. The film now switches back to Momo arriving at school one morning only to discover that Toji isn't present today. However, the rumour mill is churning again and apparently nobody in Momo's class seems to give a damn about loudly talking about her in earshot. Sai proceeds to make some offhand comment about something Toji said, then pretends to act all coy about it, but Momo takes the bait and Sai puts on her best deadpan villainess face for this shocking reveal. Now, I don't really know what gets me more here, the completely stoic, obviously nefarious, and not even vaguely threatening look Sai gives Momo during the scene, or the fact that she then proceeds to turn her back to her desk and watch Momo's sad face through a hand mirror, appearing to derive extreme pleasure from this activity like some kind of wicked sadness vampire feeding off the misery of others. I don't see your reflection in that hand mirror, Sai, you evil witch. Look at her, she's having a great time, not even trying to hide it. For the icing on the cake, Sai now rocks up to Toji's room in hospital and hands him a card signed by every student except Momo, who she claims refused to add her name because I'm dating with Kairi now. When in reality, Momo probably didn't know this card existed because Sai is a goddamn bitch. I was trying really hard up to now to avoid calling Sai a bitch, but there's really only so much I can take honestly. I think I've found my breaking point here. Meanwhile, Momo is off somewhere staring wistfully at the ocean under her sweet gothic umbrella when she is suddenly assaulted by Kairi again, who is here to let her know where Toji is, proceeds to drag her to the hospital, and inspiring pop music plays as Momo's umbrella breaks free of its former master and flies off to seek a new life of adventure among the stars. Back with Sai, she now has what I can only describe as a genuine oh shit moment as she gazes out of the window to see Momo, oh lord, she coming right towards the hospital at breakneck speed. It's time for Sai to do or die, so she jumps straight into confession mode in an attempt to snare Toji before Momo has a chance to stop them, but it's too late. Momo arrives on the scene, sees them embracing, and is about to leave when Kairi, who is actually a total bro, shows up just in time to stop her. Momo explains her absence up until now, and when Sai tries to lie her way around it, Kairi steps in to deliver some harsh truth bombs and paves the way for Momo to finally confess her love to Toji. Side note, I love the way Toji just pushes Sai away like, don't touch me, you filth, during all of this. Anyway, Momo isn't getting a response from Toji, so she does the only rational thing any reasonably well-adjusted person would do and threatens to throw herself out of a window if Toji doesn't start believing her, which I think is called emotional manipulation or something like that, but what would I know? Suddenly, a well-timed gust of wind threatens to compromise Momo's dignity as she ends up actually falling out of the window, which, as it happens, is almost comically a lot higher up than I remembered. But she is rescued at the last minute by an injured Toji, who, by the way, is actually suffering from appendicitis at this point in the anime, though I don't think it was mentioned specifically in the movie. This dude's abdomen must be screaming right now. Despite this, he apparently has enough raw power to literally single-handedly hoist Momo back up into the room, and they embrace safe and sound on the floor. Sai, who did absolutely nothing to assist in this situation, leaves in a big huff. On the way out, Kairi is confronted by Sai, who wants to know his motives. Kairi responds by saying that while he does love Momo, he gets happiness from seeing her be happy, which is why he helped her win the heart of Toji. This is what he was talking about when he said it was time to get serious. Remember when Kairi started acting the horn dog when Toji confronted him? It turns out that while on the surface level this, in addition to some previous transgressions, paint Kairi out to be a real piece of shit at this point in the movie, it's our first real hint at his underlying character revealing itself, as it appears to have been said disingenuously, and the true intention of his words was to not only discover Toji's true feelings, but also to help Toji realize them. You see, Kairi is actually a Dr. Kawashima Big Brain Academy Busco Quaternary mastermind with a heart of gold. Anyway, presumably because Kairi is the antithesis of everything that Sai aspires to, this revelation does nothing more than make her mad, and she blows up into this tirade. Now I need to stop it right here. The subtitle here reads, "You make me want to puke, die 3 times, be cavities in school trip." Now I'm not sure exactly what that last part was supposed to mean, so I attempted to translate it myself. I think the general translation is correct, but it probably reads better as "get tooth decay on the school trip." Anyhow, back to the movie. Rejoining Momo and Toji in the hospital room, Toji reveals that he does in fact share Momo's feelings, and does not in fact only like fair-skinned girls, because that was also a load of bullshit, and they become a happy couple, and the band starts up, and everyone lives happily ever after the end. Well, not the end really. This is the first major arc of Peach Girl wrapped up, and effectively it serves to introduce us to a bunch of characters and set the scene for the rest of the story. Actually, we're only about a third of the way through the film, and it only gets wilder from here, believe me. But it seems like a good time to take a little break from the story and look at some of the differences so far that have cropped up between the film and the anime. Number 1. Sai already being with Jigoro. We see a shot of Sai being a fashion model right at the start of a film, but in the series this happens after the conclusion of the first arc, and there's like 2 whole other mini arcs before the next events in the movie, which brings us to number 2. The Swim Team Bully Arc. In this series there was this entire arc where Sai was getting a bunch of other girls to bully Momo while she was on the swim team, and by the way, the swim team and the people involved, Momo's other friends, are not even brought up in this movie once. This whole setup is a vessel for some more emotional support moments from Kairi, as well as some more Toji doesn't believe Momo because he's an idiot segments. But in the end, Kairi ends up testing Toji's resolve by shoving him in a locker or something, and it's revealed that Sai is a conniving, lying little monster and everyone hates her because she keeps stealing their man! So this leads directly into number 3. Paper Sai is missing from the movie. Look, I get it. It's a live action, and the actors are definitely being a bit goofy and theatrical in places. It's a stylistic choice, and it works well, but I guess there's a limit. You see, after the Swim Team Bully arc, Sai is all deflated, figuratively and literally speaking, and she becomes something we affectionately call Paper Sai. I've covered Paper Sai on one of the previous Peach Girl reviews, but it was this whole thing where she's just flopping around in the wind, completely crestfallen after everyone finds out she's full of shit and abandons her. In the end, Momo throws her a bone because she's a hero to everyone, and Sai becomes like her biggest simp. That is until they meet Jigoro, an adult male who rocks up at a high school and declares his love for a schoolgirl in front of everyone, and this is apparently fine. That actually completes the cycle of these first 3 points quite nicely, so I'm going to move on and mention some other small things. Number 4. Cell phones. This is a cool update that modernizes the film. In the show they had flip phones, which is really indicative of the time period the story is set, which is to say the late 90s, early 2000s, back when rumours were spread by word of mouth. But Sai uses a fake social media account to do as much here instead. The shift to smartphones and social media brought about an increase in cyberbullying, and all that stuff sucks, and if you're a bully of any kind you can get in the bin, to be honest, but it's a very nice detail nonetheless that has echoes of the original show, but uses that modernization in a completely believable way that totally fits the characters and the narrative. I just think that's really cool. Number 5. Parents. I can't speak for the manga, of course, but the Kairi's disappointing father arc is completely absent from the series. In fact, I don't think we ever see the parents of anyone other than Sai in a meaningful way, including Momo's mother, who I think maybe appears in a doorway once for like a second. I think the reason for this is that there are other characters in the series that fill the role of a more mature adult, but the story itself is focused on the characters, their motivations, and their coming-of-age journey through life and love, as opposed to being the children of their parents. They are their own people at this point, though perhaps that's something that can be said for any show in which the parents or guardians are absent. I don't know, I'm no writer, it's merely an observation. Number 6. The school nurse dating Ryo. This is a detail that gets brought up much later on in the series, but they don't actually start dating until towards the end of the second half. It's at this point that I realise that if I go into detail about all the differences between the show and the movie, that I'm going to be here for the rest of my life, so I'm going to try to weave in the important ones from now on, but suffice it to say, there's a bunch of events in the series that are totally absent for the purpose of brevity and a flowing narrative. Later, for example, there's a whole section that takes place while Momo and Toji are working in the same store over summer break, and Sai keeps showing up, and Kairi's off doing some soul searching. It would just be a lot of fluff for the movie and for the review. That being said, let's get back to the film. We come back to find Momo and Toji awkwardly walking to school one morning, unused to the idea of being a couple, when Kairi shows up and starts being a weird goofball again. I really wish he'd stop doing shit like this before someone arrests him, but his goofing is once again a light ploy to force Toji into taking some action, and what do you know, it broke the ice for him and Momo. Way to go, Kairi, you did it again.
Bye bye bye.
In an adorable attempt to be more coupley, Momo comes up with the idea of a secret sign that they can use to call each other losers. Oh, wait a minute, lovers, in public without being shy about it. Except Toji is still shy about it because Momo is embarrassing and not at all subtle about it, which leads to this masterstroke of slapstick comedy. Meanwhile, Sai is taking all this really well, as we're about to find out.
Based on an old Japanese story.
After school, we see Sai and Jigoro in the middle of a photo shoot, surrounded by a gaggle of obsessive students, and it seems to be business as usual. Cut to Momo and Toji, and it seems that Momo's birthday is coming up, and Toji invites her to spend it at his house while his parents are away. So engrossed in this conversation are they that they walk straight in front of the photo shoot, and Sai gets so angry about how happy they are that she begins to channel the evil spirits of the underworld again. And so begins the Psy's nefarious plan number 2 arc of the film. How bad could it be? They're just high schoolers, and this is such a goofy film. She's probably going to put fake notes in their lockers or some other mean prank like that, right? Don't worry, it only gets worse from here. We rejoin Toji in the dreaded perfume department shopping for a suitable present for Momo and find him woefully under-accosted by sales representatives when who should he run into but Sai herself? It turns out that Sai feels bad about treating her precious friend so poorly and just wants to apologize to Toji, offering him the perfect gift suggestion as a way of making amends. And so, with that, the peach-scented perfume makes its way to Momo as we fade into the romantic rendezvous at Toji's house. This was actually a pretty cool segue, I can dig it. Momo clearly likes the perfume and we get a little tidbit about her and Sai became friends, but things soon turn to the business of romance and it seems like a perfect time for the happy new couple to share their first kiss. The band starts up, Toji leans in, and Momo's phone starts ringing. Nice timing. On the other end of the phone is Sai and she's in a panic. She tells Momo that Jigoro has been stalking her and trying to get her into his car and that he's promised to be waiting for her tonight. So Sai is suitably afraid and isn't sure what to do about it. Momo, being the good friend that she is, drops everything and goes out to find her. Without Toji, mind you. Look, I know Momo is a strong, independent woman who don't need no man, but in that situation, I'd want to be there as backup, you know what I mean? Shame on you, Toji. Momo arrives at the location described by Sai to find nobody around, but she notices Jigoro's car and goes in for a close look. There appears to be nobody inside, but all of a sudden Jigoro rocks up behind her and tases Momo in the fucking neck. That's what the fuck, Jigoro? You go around tasing high school girls often? That's fucked up. We can discuss how this completely changes the scene later, but suffice it to say that Momo is in big troubles. Or is she? Yes, she's definitely in big troubles. Back at Toji's house, Momo, with a fresh spray of peach perfume, turns out the lights and surprises him. It seems she's gotten a lot more bold while she was out, which has Toji a bit concerned, and wouldn't you know it, it's not Momo at all, it's Sai in a Momo wig attempting to stand in for Momo. She tells Toji that she saw Momo entering a hotel with another man, which Toji doesn't believe, and plays coy about having called her for help earlier. At this moment, Toji receives a message from Momo stating that she was sorry and that she has another lover that she wanted to be with. Sai offers to take Toji to the hotel in question, and we cut away to the most delicious looking cake in the Peach Girl universe to date. This cake, as it happens, was prepared specially by Kairi at his workplace to commemorate the 4th anniversary of Misao and his brother Ryo, and, job done, he heads out just in time to see Toji running down the street with Sai and elects to join them. And here's where it gets really dark. Again, I'm going to remind you of that content warning at the start before we move on. If you are sufficiently mentally prepared, let's continue. Momo awakens to find herself in a bed in a mysterious hotel room, and before she really has a chance to figure out what's going on, Jigoro walks out of the bathroom in a robe and tells her to take a shower. It's at this point she realizes she's completely naked, and just as the panic starts to set in, who would bust in through the door but Toji, Sai and Kairi? Of course, this all looks really bad, and Momo, being afraid and confused and in such a compromising position, implores Toji and the others to leave. They do, but it's clear that once again, Busco Brain Kairi isn't buying any of this shit. Jigoro leaves the room on his phone, he's asking someone for a date, and runs directly into Kairi. He's already figured out that Sai is behind this whole deal since she knew exactly which room number to lead them to, and after yelling for the police, he manages to get Jigoro to confess. And reacts in a manner appropriate to the situation. This whole event is kind of a big deal, so before we just move on from it, I want to take the time to reinforce exactly how completely horrible and evil Sai's plan truly is. Remember, this is just a jealous high schooler, yet she basically asks her supermodel boyfriend to convince Momo that she's just been sexually assaulted. And if that wasn't bad enough, to have to try to come to terms with it immediately in front of her boyfriend Toji, and remember, this was Momo's birthday, which she had chosen to spend with Toji, probably a formative moment in her life as far as romantic experiences go. This is the sort of shit that ruins lives, Sai, you fucking evil. It's also worth mentioning here another big difference between the film and the anime. At the point of them entering the hotel room, Toji in the series goes buck wild and starts smacking the shit out of Jigero's face, which is totally fair, but also more impactful when you consider that he's a model who literally makes his living off of his face. Then they head to a park and Toji tells Momo that he doesn't think any less of her for whatever happened and is generally really supportive in her time of need. In the film, however, Toji just straight up leaves and it's Kairi who does the punching. And while we are left for some time between episodes to deal with the fact that Momo has had this terrible experience here in the film, well, let's get to the next scene. Kairi in the sports hall confronts Sai about everything that went down. I have no idea why these two are even in the same place together, but he uses the opportunity to press Sai as to why she's so jealous of Momo, to which he responds, "Congratulations, Sai, you have officially made it as a sociopath." He walks off in a huff, and as soon as she leaves, it is revealed that Kairi arranged for Toji and Momo to be in the stands to hear this whole confession. He insists on the two of them going on a date on Saturday to make up for the failed birthday celebration, and the scene just has this cold fade of Momo and Toji looking at each other awkwardly. It's pretty depressing, honestly. That being said, the film did waste no time in straight up saying, "Don't worry, nothing really bad happened." And this is what I meant when I said in the content warning at the beginning that some pretty damn serious themes like this are generally brushed over. Cue this mysterious interlude in which Toji is seen speaking to some unidentified girl who looks exactly like Sai. So anyway, Toji breaks up with Momo, and we are left to wonder why. Certainly the events of the last however long they have been together, what, a week? Have been pretty stressful, but this seems pretty sudden and out of character. Hey, you don't think this has anything to do with that previous scene, do you? I'm sure we'll find out later. Momo follows Toji home and is continually avoided by him, going as far as to wait in the pouring rain for Toji to come out and speak to her, and after many hours of waiting in torrential rain he eventually does, but only to smash her birthday present on the ground like an absolute dickhead. Man, that's fucking cold, Toji, and doesn't Kairi know it, who happens to come by at this exact moment to give Toji an earful about how precious Momo's love is, causing him to storm off and leaving Kairi and Momo alone in the pouring rain. Kairi, being a kindly lad, decides that Momo could probably use a hug from her friend right now and obliges, thus ending the scene, and by extension, Momo's relationship with Toji. One week later, Momo is in bed with a fever. This is probably because of the rain, but also because of, extreme emotional stress. Her mother seems to have been relatively supportive and enact some goofs before they are interrupted by Kairi, who is calling Momo out. He shows up in high spirits and asks Momo to hang out with him and his snazzy new camera, and with a bit of additional coaxing from Mother, who wants her to buy the metal thing to chop the crab, she reluctantly goes along with him. Momo is clearly still in low spirits, but Kairi's relentless enthusiasm proves to be enough to dampen them, and they go shopping for a bit before heading back to Momo's place to make what looks like a hot dog cake. They sit, they eat cake, and Momo finally comes out of her slump. This is actually a pretty nice scene. It mirrors something that happens in the series with a shopping trip, but includes parts of the Kairi is a patissier arc that was introduced in the movie, helping to cement those new ideas that were put in for brevity, and perhaps just as importantly, cutting out the "I use my brother's credit card to buy you things" part in its place. That last part is a minor detail, but Ryo plays a much bigger part in the series than he does in the movie, so it makes sense. So, after a week off, Momo is finally ready to go back to school. She's about to turn away, but with a bit of encouragement from Kairi, heads on in to find Sai and Toji being all chummy in her classroom. Standing there, unsure of what to do, and hearing the snide comments start to sneak in, she is once again rescued at the perfect moment by, yes, it's Kairi again, who drags her out to the flower rockery to enact the peach seed scene. In short, Kairi offers her a peach seed, they bury it together, and 1 week later he brings her outside to demonstrate that the tree has already sprouted and blossomed, which is a sign that Momo will definitely be happy. Of course, Momo is the daughter of a florist, as was established earlier in the film, so she recognizes the blossom as that of a quince flower and calls Kairi out on his bullshit. Kairi is a smooth operator though, and he turns it into a romantic gesture that ends the Momo is sad arc and begins the dating Kairi arc. The band starts up again with an absolutely hype as fuck bop, and thus commences a dating montage about their whirlwind romance. So in terms of the anime, we basically just finished the first half of the series, which can easily be split into 2 arcs. The arc where Sai tries to steal Toji from Momo, and the arc where Momo and Kairi start dating. If this were the anime, there'd realistically be 2 more major arcs to go, but since the movie has to condense an entire 25 episode series into 2 hours, the second half sort of becomes one big homogenized thing, and what that means for us is that the next set of sequences are going to jump around a bit. Notably, the pacing also slows down quite a bit here as a result of cutting out a ton of story, so even though we are literally halfway through the movie, it feels more like 2/3 in the grand scheme of things. We rejoin our happy new couple at a cafe where Momo presents Kairi with a gift, a homemade phone charm. Originally this was a knitted phone case, but nobody uses those anymore, so we get this more modern equivalent instead. Kairi is of course over the moon, and soon after they make plans to go back to Shiranami Beach where they first met. However, the atmosphere is somewhat stifled when they run into Kairi's older brother Rio. Side note, the phone charm also dates this movie because no one has headphone jacks anymore. Thanks, Apple. Rio is here with Misao and invites Momo and Kairi to an industry event on the weekend. Kairi is pretty cold about this, but when Misao insists, he agrees to go. I don't remember if this is mentioned, but I think that in the anime, Rio is supposed to work for a game developer and he dresses a lot more casually, but he sort of presents himself as more of a salaryman in this film. For the record, I myself am a game developer by trade, and I can attest that, visually speaking, anime Rio is a lot more stereotypically accurate. Immediately following this, Kairi gets home to find his father poised and ready to force summer education programs upon him. We have another brief exchange between Dad saying, "Rio is better than you," and Kairi saying,
My mom thinks I'm cool.
or she would, I'm sure, if she were still alive. And while not exactly a heated argument, it's clear that neither of them walk away from the event in high spirits. The next day at school, Kairi does his usual de-stressing technique of shooting some hoops before walking out and somehow managing to leave his phone behind. A phone which is then immediately happened upon by, you guessed it, the devil herself, Sai Kashiwagi. Ever the opportunist, Sai does the neighborly thing and returns the phone to Momo. But not before leaving a big old picture of Misao on Kairi's phone screen, that little pot stirrer. I'm sure this won't cause any drama later on. Later, at Rio's industry event, we see Kairi staring vacantly in the direction of Misao as Momo tries to get his attention. He ends up asking Momo to the upcoming Matsuri and she agrees, but he seems distracted. At some point, Kairi goes off to the bathroom and Momo has an opportunity to talk to Misao about him, which is where we learn all about their past together. Sick of always being compared to his brother after the mother passed away, Kairi was pretty depressed for a while, so Rio asked Misao to be his home tutor. He did a great job as a tutor and a mentor, offering encouragement and support, but when her relationship with Rio was strained, she stopped tutoring Kairi. This sent him into such a bad state that he went to Shiranami Beach and out into the ocean, despite being unable to swim. Let's just hang on that minor detail for a second. It is implied that Kairi literally got so miserable about not having Misao around that he tried to end his own life. And, you know, this is after the death of his mother, and Misao sort of takes her place in his life, and then disappears, and this is all, in his mind, Ryo's fault, so you can see why he might have some resentment towards his older brother. That's as far as we get in their story, however, as Misao has other things to attend to, and mere moments after having to process all of this new information, Momo is snapped out of her moment by Sai, who appears to be chatting up Rio in the background. She finds an opportunity to start bad-mouthing Momo, and Rio uses classical literature to effectively tell Sai to shut the fuck up. He walks off, leaving a doe-eyed Sai to stare after him, and Momo gets out of there just in time to see Kairi and Misao enjoying each other's company on the stairs. So, I know I said I was going to avoid putting in every little change detail in this recap, but I think it's worth mentioning that there's this whole part in the anime where Rio convinces Momo that she reminds him of his dead lover who doesn't actually exist and uses this to trap her in a room and attempt to commit an act of sexual assault. It's very fucked up. But don't worry, she's able to defeat him easily in combat and escape, and the main takeaway from this that I wanted to share with you is that Ryo is a much more horrendous bastard than the film would have you believe. So, time skip to the day of the Matsuri. Kairi gets a call from Misao on the way, and the next thing we know, Momo is watching Kairi leaving in a car with Misao while she's heading to the festival herself. We don't get any context here, but this is kind of a key event, and that's all we get before skipping to Sai in a car with Ryo, who is being a massive sleazebag, and she's all too happy to be led astray by his business proposition. More on that later. Back with Momo, alone at the festival, she receives a message from Kairi claiming that he's still at work, which she knows is a lie, so she goes to leave. But who would show up at just the right time but Toji? Because of course he does. Kairi arrives just in time for a classic love triangle confrontation. When confronted, he tells Momo that he went to try and convince Misao not to marry his brother again. So Momo takes this as an admission that he loves her more instead, and Toji uses this as an opportunity to try and rekindle his relationship with Momo by facing off against Kairi. After an extremely short setup, Momo is made to choose and, forced to make a choice, decides that she doesn't want to play second fiddle to Misao and ultimately lets Kairi down. But she ain't finished yet, and she turns down Toji too, so now everyone is miserable, including Momo. I have to point out this shot right here where the band has started up again for some emotional background music, and there's this panning shot in the school towards an empty chair. Now I know this implies that Momo isn't coming to school because she's miserable and all that, but in the song, this big church organ starts up during that exact shot, and it properly makes it look like she's just dead. Like if I saw this out of context, I would think, oh, whoever that student was must have died or something, especially since it's just a montage of Toji and Kairi looking miserable at each other. Anyway, back with an equally despondent Momo, she witnesses a transaction between Sai and a mysterious businessman who pays her in advance and will meet her at the hotel next time. They end up talking about it, and Sai explains that she's part of a business where she gets paid to have lunch with old men as Ryo's business partner. Momo points out the obvious flaw in the logic of her plan, but it's pretty clear to us that Ryo is fleecing her. There's this long pause where Sai is thinking about all this, and it's kind of clear that she knows what's going on. Can't bullshit a bullshitter after all. But she seems to have accepted this as a worthy price for buying Ryo's love. I do like this long pause. It's a pretty simple and effective way to humanize Sai, who at one point in the movie literally turned her eyes into her skull and screamed as though possessed by demons. Back with Kairi, we get this tidbit about him entering the Coin de Pâtisserie competition that, if he were to win, would allow him to go to France, presumably to study making excellent desserts and thus achieving his dream of becoming a great pastry chef. On the way out, he gets a call from Momo. It takes him a while to answer, but he goes off to meet Momo where she tells him all about Sai's weird new job, and how it involves Kairi's brother Ryo. In the middle of this, she gets a call from Sai, who has supposedly been attacked and tied up in a hotel room, and a rather poetic mirror of how Sai had originally set up a similar trap for Momo involving Jigoro, if you recall that whole mess. Momo, being a hero to all, immediately wants to help Sai, but Kairi doesn't trust the call and tries to convince Momo it's not worth her time. Momo isn't fazed though, telling Kairi that although she can never forgive Sai for what she had done to Momo in the past, she had never wished ill on her in return. Kairi is convinced, since this altruism is just one of the things he loves about Momo, so he agrees to back her up.
忘れてた。俺、ももちゃんのそういうところが大好きなんだった。ももちゃんを信じる。一緒に行こう。
Cut to Sai in the hotel room, tied up on the bed, and the sound of showering and terrible shower singing in the background, and this whole setup is a one-way ticket to Nope City. Lucky for everyone involved, though, including the businessman if you consider the heinous crime he was about to commit, it turns out that Kairi somehow switched places with Sai completely. Using his well-trained, powerful basketball legs, he restrains the business dude. Momo brings a witness to call the police, and the businessman reveals that Ryo said he could do anything he wanted to Sai. It turns out Ryo has a huge debt, and he's trying to recover it by selling Sai into prostitution. She overhears this confession and is understandably upset, though that's a bit of an understatement, and in case the illegal sex trafficking of a teenager wasn't dark enough for you, she immediately runs into the bathroom and, or at least it is heavily implied, breaks a mirror and uses shards to slit her own wrists. Wow. I mean, holy shit. Now hear me out. I know this is fucked up. The desire to end one's own life is tragic always, sex trafficking is terrible, etc., but I am hard pressed to decide whether or not this actually went darker than the series. Sidetrack here, but this event is a combination of two different events from the series that are supposed to replace an entire arc in which Ryo ends up getting Sai pregnant, to her absolute joy, I might add, and he tries to pay her off and ditch her with the kid. So Sai starts blaming Misao, they have some fights, and Sai actually tries to kill Misao by pushing her into traffic. Luckily, the gang managed to stop her just in time, and this is how Misao finds out about the pregnancy. And long story short, after a telling off by Misao in which he realizes he has lost everything, Ryo ends up getting set upon in a park by another ex, Morika, who's also a character that hasn't shown up in this movie, and there's just a whole thing with that. Don't worry about that. And Sai takes a kick to the stomach, and there's this whole terrible segment where it seems like because of his actions in the past, Sai has lost her baby, and his baby by extension, and in case it wasn't fucked up enough at that point, it turns out she had a phantom pregnancy and was never actually pregnant in the first place, and the whole thing is just awful, and it's like the writer really needed a way to make something happen to Sai that was so horrible that she could become forgivable in some way. And in the series it kind of works, but we still haven't forgotten about Birthday Gate, you monster. Also, I only just realized this, but Ryo apparently gets away with this scot-free. He's never arrested, taken to court or anything, so I guess the businessman didn't reveal any of the details of the exchange. None of the characters dobbed him in. I feel like Ryo should probably be in jail by now, you know? Guess we'll never know what happened. So, back in the hospital, Kairi, Momo and Misao are present. We're told that Sai will be okay, but Misao feels guilty that this would happen to her, and Kairi has just about had enough of Ryo's shit. So he rocks up to the fancy restaurant where his father and Ryo happen to be having a meal, and sets about trying to reveal Ryo's plan. Of course, his father uses the opportunity to express his complete disdain for Kairi once again, because that's literally his entire role in the movie, but thankfully Momo is here to back up his claims and shine a light on Kairi's pastry genius. Turns out, this is the very restaurant that Kairi works at, which is quite convenient, and Momo's pressing argument forces 1D dad to show an emotion other than disappointment for once in the movie. He agrees to hash this out with Ryo someplace else, and Kairi gets some validation, and it's all very moving. And in his emotional state, Kairi reveals the truth to Momo about what happened on the day of the festival where Misao wanted to see him. It turns out, Misao had been made guarantor of Ryo's enormous debt without her permission. Wow, what a piece of shit. And that he didn't want Momo to worry about it. But she tells him that he should have done anyway, and it's a real moment here on the floor of the restaurant. Back, once again, in the hospital, Momo is visiting Sai and just generally being a good friend because that's what Momo's all about. Sai doesn't believe her at all, I guess because she thinks other people are twisted, conniving and unforgiving like her, and she also doesn't know that Toji never told Momo why he broke up with her, so she reveals the truth to Momo now. Remember that scene with Toji and definitely Sai on the rooftop? Well, it turns out that she had taken some photos of Momo in bed with Jigoro and used them to blackmail Toji into breaking up with Momo and dating her instead. Toji can't do a whole lot about this, and he wants to protect Momo's reputation, so he agrees to the plan instead of, working it out with Momo, maybe telling her the truth of what's going down and having an actual conversation about it. And that's why he dumps her, because he thinks he's being the good guy, but instead he's being a complete idiot. Sai seems to get some satisfaction even now out of Momo being upset and even tries to goad her into attacking her. Because let's face it, Sai's been through some shit, and given her personality, maybe this idea of Momo taking revenge on her would somehow validate her own misdeeds as someone who is ultimately confused by the idea of compassion. But I'm sure a psychologist could write an entire treatise on the psychology of Sai, and that person, not me. For now, Momo needs some time to think. About Toji, and how he was always thinking about her, and about the breakup and the reunion. At the same time, at least in montage time, Kairi is heading into the patisserie competition. Momo gets a text from Kairi, since I guess her date at Shiranami Beach is still on the cards after the competition. All this stuff sets us up pretty nicely for the grand finale, in which Momo will have to choose once and for all which one of the guys she will pick. This whole last part is a bit of a whirlwind, or perhaps I should say a super pop love hurricane, so it's gonna jump around all over the place, but I'll do my best to break it down. Momo meets with Kairi, presumably after the competition. She decides that the best thing to do here is, rather than go on the Shiranami date with him, give him the push he needs to confess his feelings to Misao. Kairi's a bit bamboozled, but he ultimately takes the advice, so Momo heads back home, where her mother rocks up and offers some questionable advice on the matter of love, and almost like it was planned out ahead of time, Toji shows up to see Momo. Back with Kairi, he confesses his feelings to Misao, who agrees to leave Ryo, but gently lets him down in her own way. And Kairi expresses his gratitude to Momo with this nice reminder of the phone charm that Momo gave him and the Shiranami beach tickets, which he still has. Once again back with Momo, she seems to be making up with Toji, who expresses his love for her once again. They just so happen to pass by the patisserie when they notice a poster outside. Kairi won an award for his pastry, which means he will probably be going to France. They head inside and witness what is some kind of incredible peach blossom cake that honestly looks like a relic left behind by the gods, but I digress. We know that Kairi expresses his true feelings through his work, and so does Momo, as is demonstrated through a huge emotional montage with lots of strings and crying and stuff. It is revealed that the cake is called Peach Smile, and an emotional Momo receives a goodbye message from Kairi, which proves to be too much, and she goes to run to him, but Toji stops her. Gives her a hug. He promises to make her happy, and he tells her all about how much he loves her. Then he lets her run to Kairi, which is probably the coolest thing that Toji has ever done, honestly, and I think I like the way this plays out a lot more in this movie than I did in the series, where he was a lot less cool-headed about this whole mess. Understandably so, perhaps, but this is much cleaner. Momo charges out of the door, the band starts up, Kairi's on the beach where he must engage in combat for the phone strap he lost, because this detail is kind of an important setup. More flashbacks, more running, Mortal Kombat. Why did I write that? And eventually, okay, it goes on for so long though, it's like a recap of the whole movie, and I'm sat here writing the script waiting for it all to move on, but Momo is still running in slow motion, and Kairi is still sifting water in the ocean looking for the charm that some asshole threw into the sea, which if you remember is a terrible idea, because Kairi can't swim, and this is kind of how he and Momo met in the first place, and finally, the montage is over. Momo arrives at the beach to find a very wet and very unconscious Kairi lying there. She runs past the notably vacant lifeguard stand, gives Kairi the kiss of life, they have a moment of clarity, confession and realization, and for the one last cherry on the cake, it is revealed that the only reason they managed to meet up here in the first place is because Sai somehow stole both of their Line account information and sent them fake messages, which ends up being her one moment of kindness in the film. Anyway, it's time for the big payoff. The new couple make out on the beach, fade to white as Carly Rae Jepsen starts up and Call Me Maybe takes us to the end credits, which includes a series of additional scenes of Momo and Kairi reuniting after a studio trip to France. There's also some really great behind the scenes photos and stuff in the credits too, and it's all pretty great. And another scene in which Misao and her new boyfriend meet them and they head to the school, which leads into an after credits sequence in which Kairi and Momo visit the peach tree they planted, which has now bloomed after 3 years, putting a nice little bow on the film. And with that, dear listeners, we are done with the plot recap of this movie. In the course of this recap, I've ended up watching this movie 2 or 3 times now, and as someone who started watching the series and subsequently this movie as a joke, I think it speaks volumes that I still haven't gotten bored of it despite the 2-hour runtime. It's a genuinely good movie adaptation that makes a few changes and concessions here and there for the sake of brevity. An entire post-Sai trying to steal your man arc where she becomes Paper Sai and eventually meets Jigoro, leading to the events of Birthday Gate, the whole working a summer job part of the series, post-Sai being kidnapped in which she uses her evil powers for good and has a lot more time to redeem herself, the Sai's pregnancy, Ryo being a dick arc, which is, as I mentioned earlier, combined with Sai's hotel kidnapping, which is a change that actually works really well in this condensed retelling, and Marika doesn't even show up at all. As well as the Kairi gets a summer job at a noodle place before failing to meet Momo on time because of Ryo being attacked, causing her to go on vacation with Toji instead event, and a bunch of other Misa related things, which are just a whole series of things that are kind of replaced by the Momo sees Carrie in a car on the way to the festival event. Additionally, the whole pastry chef thing and Carrie's father's approval stuff is entirely fabricated for the movie as far as I can tell. Again, having not read the manga, I can't confirm this. However, it serves as an interesting way to set up a bunch of moments for Carrie later on that don't require nearly as much back and forth as the series, and I think generally as a standalone story I like the way this plays out, and while I do like the ebb and flow and the overall hurricane-like nature of the series, I really appreciate the thought that went into making sure that the film still followed a good pace. You need only look at my condensed pure F notes to realise that by the end of the series so much is going on that it's almost impossible to keep track, and even the movie has a hard time with this, having to constantly throw in flashbacks and montages and occasionally jump around the place. It's a very, very dialogue heavy story. However, overall, I would say if you are looking for a story that is kinda goofy, kinda sweet, just generally an emotional roller coaster, and you don't want to sink your time into 25 episodes of the anime, I would highly recommend this movie. The performances are good, in the slightly over-the-top way you would expect from a film of this tone and demographic. The score is really nice, and there's a few pop bangers thrown in there for good measure. I'm a big fan of the overall style of this movie, the way the peach-like colour grading adds this dreamy pastel quality to the whole film, and the few occasions where they use compositing to do these really obvious overlay effects, and the way it just keeps on moving, telling the story at a good pace, and rarely getting bogged down in meaningless dialogue. After all, I've found that when I did the original series recap episodes, very few lines of dialogue ended up being something that I could leave out, since the conversations are so carefully written, so this is probably almost impossible to avoid from a filmmaking standpoint. Heck, I even dig the presentation of the end credits. Overall, Peach Girl ends up being a 2-hour movie that will have you questioning where the time went, and if you enjoy it as much as I did, leave you very satisfied at the end of it. So there it is, the Peach Girl movie review. A little bit later than anticipated, it's taken me a really, really long time, but I hope you enjoyed hearing about the film. And once again, just a great big thank you to everyone that donated to our Extra Life charity drive to meet the incentive to make this happen. So with that finally done, what's next from Peach Girl? Well, I haven't read Side Story yet, and there's a Taiwanese TV drama apparently, and there was like a whole new manga series called Peach Girl Next back in 2016, but I think having covered 25 episodes in a movie, I'm good for now. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and be excellent to each other. And watch Peach Girl, it's great!